This is something I did want to get out there, talk about and get out there and get people's attention on, because everything I've looked at over the years, and this is regarding Zechariah Sitchin and his translation of the Sumerian texts and other texts that deal with the Anunnaki, and that they all seem to hit on, and I don't care if it's, and it's no, it's not putting anyone down by any means, but whether it's Ancient Aliens TV show or different books or videos, whatever, they all seem to talk about, okay, the Anunnaki created man. They altered the DNA of one of the,
Hominids.
I'm sorry?
One of the hominids.
One of the hominids that existed on Earth at that time to make Homo sapiens. And thus they created man. And so it seems to be negating that, oh, they're saying, well, we're saying there's no God. If you believe that, you're saying there's no God.
Well,
and then
I think what a lot of them do, like you watch Ancient Aliens and all these people, is the terminology they use a lot is, well, the gods came from the heavens and
Right.
created man. And that's what they say. And maybe a lot of the interpretations of the clay tablets are written that way because the context of those Homo sapiens, like these were essentially gods to them because they did come from the stars.
Sure.
But they are not, but to
Well, what it doesn't point out, what they lose is, over again, they seem to be, what gets interpreted in these pieces is that the Anunnaki are who we're saying created humans, therefore there is no God. And as we think of God normally when you say it, but the Anunnaki themselves believed in a creator of everything, and they did not view themselves as gods. They had a strong belief in a higher power. And while to them they were solving a practical problem that they had, needing labor in the mines, etc., and not having enough Anunnaki on individuals on this planet to do the production, and don't need to get into that kind of detail, but this was a practical solution that they came up with. Later, they realized that this had been part of the divine destiny, that they serendipitously fell into and did something right here. And they also, when we talked about them bringing about the flood to destroy all man, and one of the leaders, Inlay, was going to wipe out all of mankind with the flood and let them die, because the Anunnaki had basically lost their purity by inbreeding with Homo sapiens that they created, with using their own DNA as well. And yet this creator of all things that they believed in, apparently, or was reported, sent an emissary to show one of the Anunnaki how to save mankind and from the flood, so all would not be destroyed. And
who sent the emissary?
The creator of everything.
Okay.
And they seem to have a delineation between, they could control fates, they could shape fates and how things became fated to some individuals and circumstances. I'll get into that for a second. But then there was destiny. Destiny was what the creator of all things had determined. And that you couldn't change. That, again, all-powerful creator of all things, you could not go against the creator of all things.
You have the ability to change your fate, but not your destiny.
Right. And that goes actually along the lines of the teachings that, so much of us, so many of us have follow or think about, is that our decisions that we make and what we think about on a daily basis determines our fate and the directions we're going in our life. And so, not so much different, just worded a little differently, using the word fate to say the decisions you're making, my friend, are determining what's going to happen with the rest of your life. But that which is destined is destined.
There's like a 4-tiered path of the philosophy or concept of life in ancient Japanese Tao thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and there it does, and it I'm trying to remember all 4 of them, but it does it does have 2 of the 4. One of them is fate, which you can control, and destiny, which you can't. That comes from Creator.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and this is what's left out of all the things I seem to see that are put out there about the Anunnaki, is that they did have respect for, worshipped, honored a higher power. That they did not look at themselves as the higher power. But so much of the material out there seems to indicate that they consider themselves gods and the creators of man, and therefore they were, who, should be worshiping or whatever. And the Anunnaki recognize their superiority in technology and other physically themselves, etc. But they did not see themselves as the God of all things, the creator of all things, the superior, higher being. That's not how they perceive themselves at all. And they, even Enlil, who is going to destroy all of mankind, let them be destroyed after the destruction. And he realized that Inke had actually tricked him, and figuring out a way, being guided by the emissary that had been sent by the creator of all things to him, had allowed humans to survive. He realized that this was part of the divine destiny that the creator of all things had intended. And in the Bible, it's fairly clear in a number of places that God considers whatever his prophets do is the same as him doing it. Whatever Jesus did was the same as him doing it. Whatever the believers in him do is the same as him doing it. The Anunnaki, and modifying the DNA, is just doing the will of the creator of all things. And it's the same as him doing it. He did it. He just used the hands, if you will, of these individuals we call Anunnaki to physically do it. And he brought this about. So what's the difference? He did create. The creator of all things did create man. He just used the Anunnaki to do it.
Yeah.
And if it was not part of the destiny that was designed by the creator of all things, the Anunnaki never would have done it. So anyway, that's just the fact that the Anunnaki believed in a higher power. They believed that that higher power had destiny in this universe to be fulfilled, and that they, in some small way, from their perspective, could fulfill certain destinies of the higher power, and is usually left out of all of the material that is presented about the Anunnaki. And that's one of the things I want to get out there, is that they don't consider themselves the God of the creator of everything. They're not replacing or supplanting the Yahweh, or who we look at as the creator of everything. That's kind of that basic point.
That's amazing to me because I mean, as you know, and people watching this that may not know, but like much like yourself, and I'm sure a lot of people out there, probably people that would be interested in watching this, that I've read a lot and watched a lot of videos and listened to a lot of lectures about the Anunnaki, and you are right. I've never heard anyone talk about the spiritual beliefs or the religious beliefs or the religious knowing. For example, if some of the Anunnaki, like you said, encountered their own prophet of creator, like similar to Jesus, that told them that this was divine destiny, them creating Homo sapiens on Earth. Nobody has. I've never heard anyone talk about that. I've never heard anyone write about that, and I think you are right about getting it out there because it does, I think, limit people's perceptions when they even feel open-minded enough to embrace these concepts or teachings or knowledge, because you have people talking about Zechariah Sitchin's writing or the Book of Enoch and the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, and all of these references talk about the Anunnaki being gods who descended from heaven. And yes, to Homo sapiens whom they created, maybe it seems like godlike powers. When science is advanced enough, it always almost seems like magic. Mm-hmm. But a lot of whether the author or narrator, I don't know if they have the explicit intention of telling you that there is no God, that it's just the Anunnaki, or whether that's not actually the message they're trying to convey, but it just gets lost in translation because they don't articulate what you did. But it does give a lot of people interested in this subject the impression that we don't need to now even think about Yahweh, the creator of everything, Wakantanka, being in the equation, because it's just the Anunnaki, and that's just not the case.
Yeah, and it leaves you, a lot of the materials, I think, leaves the reader or the watcher thinking that, well, then what you're saying is it's all just evolution through the whole universe, just evolved on its own with no grand design or anything else, with no God of everything, with no creator of everything. And no, that's not what Zechariah Sitchin interpreted from the tablets. And one thing I like about Sitchin's work is that what a brilliant individual this guy was, but he wanted to translate from the original script. So he was not diluting the message of the original script. So, and let's translate it directly from the Sumerian instead of from the Sumerian to the Greek to the English. Even one step. There were flavors, if you will, that would change in the understanding. And but so this. And I think the reason why it's important to me is I think a lot of people that could gain from reading these materials and knowing about the Anunnaki don't, because they think, oh, this is evil, this is bad, because they're saying there's no God. That's not what they're saying at all. But that's, like you say, whether the authors or whether the people that are presenting this are trying to move people on that path, or they just are so focused on, this is amazing, here's evidence that we were manufactured, so to speak.
And I can't understand that. I can't understand how their motivation is, no, I just want to get the knowledge and the message out that we're engineered by another race of beings, and that is a profound message that I commend them on sharing. Yeah. But yeah, I think that for people that might be more conventionally religious, but maybe open-minded enough to embrace these historic ancient texts and writings about the Anunnaki creating us, maybe they, like you said, they say, oh, well, this is just trying to say that there is no God, and then on the opposite side, you have a lot of maybe atheistic-minded individuals who are like, oh, see, there is no God, it's just the Anunnaki.
Right.
And it's like, no, just like I think one of the biggest problems with Western modern society is that, and I mean this on every level of our society, our civilization, from the most mundane to the most profound philosophic and spiritual concepts, is we tend to isolate and compartmentalize everything. And we do it with modern medicine where, somebody has this affliction and they only try and do palliative care on that one affliction. And it's as opposed to more holistic medicine, which tries to look at all these other aspects of your life in relation to that one ailment. Or we do the same thing in a community or a society. We say, well, we've got a homelessness or a mental health issue or an autism issue. Well, let's look at that one thing. It's like, well, what's going on in the entire society that's causing that? And so, here we are again with, in context, a piece of teaching that comes from a lot of archaeological black and white evidence of these ancient Sumerian tablets, which when translated say that very clearly, a lot of very articulate evidence saying that human beings were created by Anunnaki, or compartmentalizing that piece of historic data and saying, oh, well, there is no God now, we were just created by aliens. It's like, no, that's not what it says at all.
Yeah.
And in fact, there is writing about what the Anunnaki themselves believed.
Right.
And I think,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think that's an interesting little segue to something we were talking about earlier to that point, because I think I think you got everything you needed to on that piece. Is talking about the divinity of the universe, the creator of everything, and how the Anunnaki believed in him, but also and talking about all of these different races of aliens that may be visiting us or alien visitation. The concept that a lot of people don't talk about what the religious or spiritual beliefs of all of those
that they have them in the first place, and that's actually where I was going. My next comment. So we're in track, but starting with, since we're talking about the Anunnaki, but starting with the Anunnaki, the fact that they had a religion, and to kind of segue a little bit to the side, or do a little cute angle over here, they also eventually set up the priesthoods and the rituals for the humans. And why? Because they recognized, because the humans had evolved through the genetic engineering that was done by the Anunnaki, their perception of spiritual realms had advanced. And this gave them the tools to interact with those realms, much like the Anunnakis did in their own religion. And so, again, the very little of what Sitchin writes about goes into detail about their religion, but the fact that they did have one, and they did have those guidelines that religion brought about, to have civilization, there are certain conditions that must exist, and an agreement of what is acceptable behavior, what is not acceptable behavior, lying, cheating, stealing, murder, whatever, what we call the Ten Commandments, was apparently very much part of their teachings. And some of what they, this can get off into another subject, but some of what they did with humans, from the mating with humans to even the designing of humans, broke some of their own religious laws. Yet they later look at this was divinely guided by the creator of all things to help this evolve, to create the humans and our culture, society, etc., that so much of it comes directly out of that time period with Sumerians. And so they did not view themselves as perfect beings at all.
Thought that I had in the moment while you were talking, and it was interesting to me, about So two things that you said today. One, that you said how even though the Anunnaki initially created the human race, created Homo sapiens through genetic engineering, really from a kind of utilitarian and very practical purpose of just needing a labor force.
Yeah.
But then after the fact, they kind of realized, partly through the creator sending an emissary or a prophet, that this was
Right.
actually good and part of the divine destiny that the creator had for the universe.
Yeah.
So, and then also how you said that, and another thing that you said today was how some of the aliens visiting Earth today in modern times, maybe the motivation of some of them is to create their own genetic hybrid of mankind with whatever race they are.
Right.
And the thought that those 2 points that you touched upon sparked was an interesting one, which is something I've heard other people talk about in interviews, like Billy Carlson, I think his name, or Billy Carson, and a couple other people, is they talk about when the Anunnaki first created humans, that it was, like you said, it was viewed as sacrilegious by some of them in their
Right.
way and their civilization. Some of the Anunnaki were very upset because they had done some earlier versions of genetic engineering for beings on the Earth using just DNA of what was existing on Earth, but the creatures they created could not reproduce, and it wasn't working. So it was, I guess, Inky,
Yeah.
who used her own DNA.
Well, Inke, well, and I forget, there was actually a female Anunnaki that did the work.
That's right, yeah,
Scientist.
because Inky was the
Yeah.
male.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget the name of the female Anunnaki, but it was a female Anunnaki who actually used her own like Anunnaki DNA and
Yeah.
spliced it with the hominid DNA.
Yes, that's where. Go ahead.
And then she actually, instead of just, growing it in a test tube or however they did it, she actually basically artificially inseminated herself. And she carried that first Homo sapien to term. She was pregnant, according to what I've seen in the interpretations. She carried it for 10 months and then birthed it herself. And that first Homo sapien was Adamu, who is Adam.
Yeah.
And then it was the male, her father or brother, whoever it was, that a lot of the Anunnaki were they viewed it as sacrilegious, and they viewed it as, and all this stuff, and they wanted to destroy all of mankind.
Right.
And one of the reasons they wanted to destroy all of mankind is because in doing this, she actually made us too powerful. And some of the Anunnaki, not in that moment, but that because of the way we turned out with the Anunnaki DNA and other DNA, that they realized that we could eventually, not in that moment, but we could eventually become more powerful than the Anunnaki. And that scared them. And so what's interesting about that, which is that's in the translations, in the tablets that have been translated, that once she created us, that it made some of the other Anunnaki very uncomfortable, that they viewed it as sacrilegious, and that some of them realized that in time we would grow and evolve to become a more dominant or more evolved or more powerful species than them. They don't articulate in what ways, but just that was their fear. And what's interesting about that is, in context of what you mentioned about how, the creator of all things that exist above Anunnaki, the divine of the Anunnaki, eventually came with a prophet and said, no, this is a really good thing that you did,
Right.
and created us. And then now you're saying that these other alien species may want to create hybrids with us, and it could be because we are so unique and we are so powerful, and it was a good thing ultimately for the universe and the evolution of all life that we are here. But the final thing, and so it's just interesting. It's just interesting to think about. And the final thing I'll say to that, which is interesting, is I think that the Anunnaki or somebody shortened our lifespans because they were scared of us. Because I think that, because you and I both know that once you die, the higher self version of you, the consciousness eternal that's part of God, it lives on forever, and it can come and be reincarnated. But most of the time, even though there is the Akashic record and there is a lot of past life memory regression that we know of that we can talk about in a different episode. But for the most part, we forget when we come back as humans. We're born again.
Right.
We forget everything, and so I think that because when we were first created, like the Anunnaki, they lived for thousands and thousands of years, and we know from the the Sumerian king tablet or whatever
Right.
it is that the Anunnaki kings, the Anunnakian kings, they ruled for 10, 20, 30, 50,000 years, thousands and thousands of years. So they had this crazy lifespan. But even Homo sapiens that lived on the earth at that time that they created, they would live for 800 years or 1,000 years. And, I would say that if you're scared of a species that you created and what they could evolve to become, well, think about all of these concepts that you and I are talking about, and think of in you and I's short life. I'm 38, you are 70. So you had 70 years on this earth, I've had 38 years, and for our handful of years, 70 and 38 years, we have accumulated all of this wisdom and knowledge that we're sitting here talking about today. Well, imagine what we could accumulate if you and I had 800 years. And I think that, there was a period of time where Homo sapiens did live that long, and something happened to where we don't really make it past 100. And I think that was a big safeguard that the Anunnaki put in.
Well, the Chronicles of the Anunnaki in the translation do talk about that there's significant resistance to extending or having the Homo sapiens have a long life. When the first hybrid, if you will, I'll use that term, the birth of a child that came from the actual intercourse of an Anunnaki with a Homo sapien woman, went to Nibiru, their planet that is the 12th planet that Sitchin talks about. He was ordered not to eat or drink any of the food. And the reason why was it would give him the same lifespan that the Anunnaki had. And they did not want that to occur because, exactly like you're saying, they realized that then humans were the same as the Anunnaki. And the only difference was the lifespan. And again, in the biblical version of Eden, and not eating of the tree of life. And why? Because then you know good and evil, you know the truth of things and all. But that was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But what wasn't partaken of was the tree of life. And so part of many spiritual paths is to obtain the fruit of the tree of life, which I always think is kind of interesting. That's apparently some kind of food or whatever that the Anunnaki use to extend their lives.
Interesting.
And their orbital span is 3,500 years, and supposedly they came back around 300 BC. I'm sorry, 300 AD, and there was historically the events on the earth at that time that could be attributed to a passing body with great gravity. And I'll get into that later on, but it's not going to be back around. Some people think, oh, it's coming right now. Well, no, it's
another 1,000 years.
Another 1,000 years away. So, in by my simple calculations, but and I always kind of laugh because it was a female Anunnaki that did the DNA splicing and all. So is there a mother God? Oh yeah, there's mother God right there. And and also what fascinated me was the fact this creator of all things actually manifests a being to come to Inca, and actually he went to the planet. He interacted with Inlay and others as well, and was around for quite a while, and then just left. And but they all recognized who and what he was eventually. And but what does that tell you about
Was that
the
the
creator?
prophet from the creator?
Yeah, but what does it tell you about the creator of all things? That he's actually very much aware of what's going on to the point that he will send, manifest a being.
Yeah.
Here, here is your prophet or guide or teacher or whatever you want.
And that's why one of the many reasons I do truly believe that Jesus was the Son of God, because I believe in the validity of Jesus, just like I believe in the validity of the Buddha or even the Prophet Muhammad,
Sure.
or anybody who, I think that it's just like there's not one person for you romantically in the world, that it's all about place and time and energetically what is best for you. And I think that the Creator knows and sees when to send a prophet or an emissary, or to manifest somebody to help the people.
And and this emissary took a great deal of interest in interacting with Inca. I think that can happen, and does happen, on an individual basis, of people who are seeking God and seeking guidance, trying to do the right path for them in their relationship with God. That sometimes that messenger may be through somebody you're doing business with, or a number of different sources that give you that piece of knowledge that you need at that moment to know where to go, what to do, how, or the rest of your life here. It can be. I think I've been visited by angels, messengers, a number of times in my life, but not realizing all the time that they were angels. They're just people that suddenly were there in my life, and we get into a conversation, and here's the answer you're needing. And I think this is much more part of our reality than what people give credence to.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.